Tell you what, it is hard to keep clean. It's like thumbprints everywhere. Now this is the brand new 2022 Daiwa Exist pre-release that has just hit the market. And today we are going to not only be giving one of these away, but we're doing a full review after 2 months worth of use. When the Daiwa manager handed this to me 2 months ago, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Byron, I need you to take care of this reel." And I think I've just took a little bit too much of a liberty on that front.
That's a fish.
I'll take him. It's a good way to start.
So in this video, we are going to talk about its performance and the pros and cons of the reel, because it is a $1,100 reel, Australian dollars, a little bit cheaper stateside obviously, but it is Daiwa's most expensive spinning reel. It's their flagship model, and it's got all the new features in it that you can expect flow through all the other models over the next year or so. Now, before we get into it, full disclosure, this reel is a pre-release reel that was provided to me free of charge for the purposes of the review that you guys are watching now. Obviously, the review comes out at the same time generally as the reels come out, and you'll notice that this week in particular, these brand new Exists are hitting Australian fishing tackle stores, or worldwide for that matter. There is some pretty cool things in this reel that we'll get to, because whilst it looks simple, and we'll probably start there, there is a lot of features in here that actually took me by surprise and have a practical application. It's probably worth mentioning as well, whilst on one side of my boat and kayak I have been running the Daiwa Exist, on the other side I've actually been running the Shimano Stella, and I will be doing a 1v1 comparison on those brand new 2022 models. So to make sure that you don't miss out on that video, make sure you hit that subscribe button and smash that like. That'd be greatly appreciated. It really does help the channel grow. Now, at first glance out of the box, you can be forgiven for thinking this reel looks a little bit simple. The finish is smooth, the edges are clean, and there aren't those fashionable slices that are usually taken out of the spool that we traditionally see here and here. And I have to be honest, aesthetically, I like that change, but I get not everybody might be into that. For those of you that aren't though, there's actually a really good reason why Daiwa have gone down this path. And it might have been admittedly missed a little bit initially. When the Exist first came out, a lot of people went to social media and started talking about the whole concept of no visible screws. And whilst that is a pretty cool thing in terms of the aesthetics, but the actual reason for it is the practicality of line management. There's no jagged edges on this thing, everything is rounded, and that means that there's no area for line to get caught in. Things like the spool and the rotor are all one piece, so there's no like traditional grooves on the, or grooves or panels where your line might get caught in while you're using the reel, particularly in the wind where, you know, sometimes you do get some tangles. In conjunction with this kind of clean concept, you also have a few little features in here, like this edge at the bottom of the spool that's got a real practical application. Officially, it's called the line deflection skirt, and its purpose is to create a barrier at the bottom of the spool that stops the line from folding under the spool, and it avoids this type of tangle from occurring. Now, I suspect simply adding a lip to the bottom of the spool isn't going to stop that knot from occurring at all, but it's a preventative measure, it's new, it's innovative. And if you compare it to an old Luvius, you'll actually see that the Luvius works in exactly the opposite direction, with that spool actually directing line below the area. Now, for a technical guy like me that likes to see these little changes and slight improvements in reels, I'm really looking forward to seeing whether this long term actually flows through the remainder of their reels and the remainder of the Daiwa range. So the first two features of the reel have been about line management. The third one I'm going to talk about is the new drag that Daiwa are announcing with this reel. It's called ATD Type L. Now, to explain it, traditional drag systems require a higher activation force, if you like. Traditionally, we've had to pull a harder force for drag to activate or start to spin the spool, and then after that, it's only a lesser force that requires it to continue to engage. If you need a large force to activate your drag, what you'll end up with is traditionally a large shock through the line. That means that traditionally when you're targeting a big fish, for example, and that fish hits your line and goes bzzz, dink, and something gives way, there's a lot of shock and absorbance on that line whilst the drag tries to catch up with the force that the fish is putting on the line. With type L, that initial activation drag is actually less. Now Daiwa sent me this graph to show you, and apparently it shows that that type L is a lower force. I guess the so what here is that if Daiwa are doing something that is going to help me catch bigger fish, I'm always going to be in favor of that. Now on the water, from the moment that I started using this reel, I noticed one big major difference in it and how it felt in my hand. And that's got to do with the air drive technology. And there's 4 components to that, and I'll explain what those are in a minute. But the reel doesn't perform or feel like a traditional reel might. And to explain that, this is an old Luvius that's mismatched with a silver wolf spool that I sometimes use. Traditionally, what we've done is we've grabbed these handles and spun them hard and then gone, wow, look how smooth this reel is. Look, the inertia just keeps going round and round and round. How good of a reel must it be? And the truth of the matter is that's probably only half of the story.
So Exist for us is all about giving the angler control. So when we talk about giving the angler control, we're talking about things like being able to start reeling very easily and being able to stop reeling very easily. It might be something that's hard to picture or you probably haven't thought of before, but when you have a very heavy rotor, to start winding will be difficult, but to continue winding will be very easily, which ultimately means when you want to stop winding, it actually takes longer to stop the reel from winding because you have more momentum and more mass spinning around the reel, and it's harder to stop that. So having a very light rotor and light bail, you get that light startup inertia, but it also gives you a very easy stop, I guess you'd say, which ultimately gives the angler the control.
I was really impressed with how this felt on the water. From a technical point of view, over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, you've heard Daiwa talk about MQ, a monocoque body, LT, light and tough construction, and a digi-gear drive shaft in the center. And all that tech is really concentrated on the bottom half of the reel. Air drive actually concentrates on the other side, and that tells us that Daiwa has shifted their focus to the top half of the reel, and you can expect that to flow through the other reels over the next period. But air drive is the term that Daiwa will start talking about soon, and it consists of 3 parts that you can see and 1 that you can't. The first is the air drive spool. Single piece construction, like I mentioned earlier, plain, simple, lightweight, with the school skirt that I mentioned before. You'll also notice internally the teeth are actually beveled so that the backside of the drag is smooth, and that means that the spool can rotate around the drag much easier. The second piece is the bail arm itself, and it is 33% lighter than the 2018 Exist that came out. If you actually put them side by side, there is a visible size difference. But the big thing about the bail that I wanted to talk about is the angle that you can see here. That angle means that if you've got any slack line below the bail arm, while you're winding, it will take it up and automatically fit the line into the line roller. Now, whilst we're talking about the line roller as well, this little guy here that guides the line onto the spool, for the first time, it's actually not a one-size-fits-all item on these reels. Traditionally, Daiwa and other brands, in their defense, have had a one-size-fits-all. You get a little bit of twist between those 2 mechanisms, and now all the different sizes of Exist actually have different size line rollers on them to match the size of the spool. That was a challenge to explain. Third item that you can visually see is the egg-shaped rotor around the outside, and there's probably 2 points I'll talk about here. The first one is it's 16% lighter, which means it's 16% easier to turn, and it's also one piece in the form of an egg shape, which means that its center of gravity is in the middle and it's easy to turn. The balance of it isn't waving around left, right, and center when you're using it. It's a nice and stable center, as opposed to, you know, those off-balance reels that sometimes you get that will sit in your hand and do something similar to that. The fourth component to air drive is the shaft in the middle, and for your engineers out there, it is a floating main shaft. For the non-engineers amongst us, it basically means that the shaft in the middle that's transmitting all the power is doing it really efficiently and with minimal friction, so there's not a lot of loss of power, if you like, or control, which again reinforces that whole do what I say and be really responsive concept. The last feature I'll mention, I'll go back to this Luvius, is this concept of the bail arm going over the top. Now, older reels were never that great at this automatic bail arm deploy, redeploy kind of thing. You get this like clunky movement, if you like. That has changed on this bad boy. They've changed the mechanism in it, and it is now much nicer to use and just goes straight over the top. Now, I don't recommend that you actually use this as a normal method to put the bail arm back over. You should really be doing it with your hands, like this video here. But if you're the type of guy that does that because out of habit pattern or something or other, you'll now notice a nicer change or a nicer transition for that bail arm to come back over. Now, if you stuck around for the giveaway, this is the section of the video that you have been waiting for. A big shout out does go to Daiwa Australia for providing one of these 2500 size Exist Reels 2022 models, brand spanking new, to one of you guys. In 1 week from today, I'll announce the winner, but you've basically got to do 2 things to enter. The first is like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below on what you would use your 2500 size reel for. Open-ended question, I don't care how you answer it, just tell me. The second thing you need to do is be a member of the channel. To do that, visit the channel homepage on a laptop or computer and click on this join button here. A channel membership allows you access to multiple giveaways on this channel and provides you pre-access to some of the content that I am working on and release weekly. It's a place that I prioritize answering your questions, and for as little as $1 a week, you can help this channel remain independent and support its growth. So do those 2 things, and in 1 week from today, you may have an Exist with your name on it. I've got to be honest, there's not a lot of channel members in there at the moment, so your probability is actually quite good. In terms of people's reactions, though, a few different people on the scene have seen this reel either on the boat or in the kayak as I've been going about my business. I'd say that about 80% of people did like how the reel looked, but realistically that means that 20% weren't completely sold on the aesthetics. And I think that's because of the mental model that people might hold on their high-end reels. They're expecting these things to look like Ferraris with funky panels and wings and random things all screwed in. But the more I think about this reel, the more I think it's kind of like the Tesla of the reel space. Externally looking at the car, it's clean, it's smooth, but once you sit inside it, you can see the computers, the station keeping, the lane technology, and the cameras. And after using it for 1 session, you realize how good the thing is. The last point I will mention before I finish though is wear and tear. I did beat this thing up a fair bit and use it pretty heavily, and the only real nick here, I'll zoom in on it so you can see it, is a bit of gravel rash. I think I just took off a little bit of paint on that edge there. But importantly, after it went for a swim in the salt water, I've taken it apart and I've got nothing adverse, no grinding, no crunchiness, and there's no signs of corrosion, which I guess you'd expect and want out of a $1,100 reel. I'd certainly be upset if that reel fell apart at the first sign of anything salt. Now, whilst I rate the Exist and I could not find a flaw with it, I think the question that majority of people will ask is about value for money. Now, when I consider the majority of the reels on my boat though, they are somewhere between $400 to $500, like this one here. And out of it, I probably expect a maximum of say 5 odd years. It'll probably get serviced once or twice in there, and you have to remember I'm a heavy fisherman, so lots of salt water, lots of kayaking, lots of abuse, and I'm on the water every single week. When I consider the Exist, on the other hand, I'm looking at this reel as a 10+ year reel, and it feels like that. It's built like that. There's less movement in the system, and it's gonna last me longer. It feels great, and it's fashionable. And that for me is, I guess, value for money. I'm not sure what much more I can say about that. Remember the giveaway. I hope you enjoyed the video. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.